Everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. All right. Welcome to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the feasibility study and alternatives analysis for flood risk reduction near channels P130-05-00 and P130-05-01 near your community. This virtual community meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to continue to share vital information with the community during this period when in-person public meetings have been suspended due to safety concerns from the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Sparkle Bell with the Flood Control District Communications team, and I'm joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and other subject matter experts to ensure we continue to keep you up to date on these important flood mitigation projects in your community. We are also joined by staff from area elected officials' offices and community associations. So thank you all for joining. And we're glad to see the community so engaged in these projects. We look forward to continuing to share updates and keeping you all in the community involved. This virtual public meeting will begin with a presentation to share project updates, including the project location, the feasibility study objectives, and some of the feasibility study's findings, including area challenges. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members. Attendees will be able to submit comments and questions through the website or via phone. Any comments not addressed during the Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District following the public comment period. Instructions on how to participate in this virtual open house are included on the slide, on this virtual meeting webpage, and on the Flood Control District website. I will also share a reminder of these instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of this meeting. We will now transition to Tawana Cooper, Manager of Capital Projects North with the Flood Control District, who will share information about the district and this project. Tawana, over to you.
Thank you, Sparkle, and a special thanks to each of you for joining us tonight. In this presentation, we will give you a brief overview of this project, but before we get into the project specifics, we want to share some information about the Flood Control District. The Harris County Flood Control District is a special purpose district created by the Texas legislature in 1937 in response to devastating floods that hit the Houston area in 1929 and again in 1935. The Flood Control District was created to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood damage reduction. Our mission has greatly expanded over the years, with billions of dollars in infrastructure improvements in the ground. While we are a separate entity from Harris County, the Harris County Commissioners Court serves as our governing body. The mission of Harris County Flood Control District is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work, and to provide those projects with appropriate regard for community and natural values. This is a map of Harris County watersheds. Now, a watershed is simply a geographical region of land that drains to a common channel or outlet. Harris County has 22 main watersheds totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channel. Now, in case you're wondering how long 2,500 linear miles is, that is approximately the distance from New York to California. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and needs. The project we are presenting tonight is in the Greens Bayou watershed, and its location is represented by the red star on the map. As you know, our area is prone to flood, and here are some reasons why. One is the extreme rainfall, including tropical storms and hurricanes. Another is the flat, slow draining land, and then also clay soils that do not soak up excess rainfall quickly. The Flood Control District shares jurisdiction with other agencies over flooding issues within Harris County, and we often partner with them to provide flood damage reduction projects. This slide illustrates that shared jurisdiction. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of this diagram, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from streets and homes. In incorporated parts of Harris County, those storm sewers and roadside ditches are the responsibility of the underlying municipality. And in unincorporated parts of the county, they are the responsibility of Harris County Engineering. Now, when the size of a storm sewer is increased, as shown on the bottom left corner of this diagram, this results in an increase in the runoff from the neighborhood. In order to avoid impacts to properties downstream, stormwater detention basins are often constructed to temporarily store the excess stormwater during heavy rain events. In the middle is a stormwater detention basin on this diagram. When the Flood Control District designs stormwater detention basins, we often partner with Harris County precincts, utility districts, and others that may want to include recreational amenities, such as trails adjacent to our basins and along our channels. The Flood Control District coordinates with its partners to provide space for such amenities, but we do not fund them. The right side of this diagram shows how larger bayous and channels take the collected stormwater and move it through our drainage system and ultimately into Galveston Bay. Now, the next two slides will provide an overview of funding sources for our flood damage reduction projects. On August the 25th, 2018, Harris County voters approved $2.5 billion in bonds for flood damage reduction projects. This vote followed a series of public meetings across Harris County in each watershed, which resulted in a list of what is now 181 bond projects. 149 of those 181 projects have been initiated so far, including all of the bond projects identified in the Greens Bayou watershed. Now, while the bond was for $2.5 billion, the full cost of every project in the bond tables is nearly $5 billion. We anticipate being able to provide projects that exceed the $2.5 billion bond because during meetings that preceded the bond election, we made it very clear that we would need funding partners to fully construct the projects in the bond program. And due to partnership funding, we currently anticipate being able to fund projects that exceed the $2.5 billion bond by $2.4 billion for a total of $4.9 billion in projects. A total of more than $680 million in partnership funding has been secured so far. Now, the actual timing of each individual project will depend on a variety of factors, including environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, and in some cases, requirements of a particular grant. That said, project lists and projected schedules are updated regularly on our website. This graphic shows many of the partnerships flood control may engage in to fund a project, including federal, state, and local agencies. Each agency has its own definition of eligible projects and its own requirements for funding participation. The Flood Control District works diligently to match projects to the right partnership opportunities. We will now move into the part of the program that is specifically about Greens Bayou watershed and the feasibility study for flood reduction channels near P130-05-01 and P130-05-00. This map shows the overall layout of Greens Bayou. Greens Bayou is located in the North Harris County area and encompasses portions of the cities of Houston and the city of Humble, as well as unincorporated Harris County. The upper reach of Greens Bayou flows in an eastward direction, and the lower reach flows southward into the Houston Ship Channel. The Greens Bayou watershed covers about 212 square miles and includes 4 primary streams, and those streams are Greens Bayou, Halls Bayou, Garner's Bayou, and Reinhardt Bayou. This map demonstrates the many flood risk reduction projects occurring across Greens Bayou. In addition to the flood control district projects, which are shown by yellow and green stars on the map, Harris County Engineering, who has jurisdiction over subdivision drainage projects in unincorporated Harris County, is also working on numerous projects across the watershed. Those projects are shown here in red. All of these projects are funded in part or in whole through the 2018 bond program. For more information about projects within the Greens Bayou watershed, please visit hcfcd.org/greens. Tonight, the project we are focusing on within Greens Bayou watershed is located west of Old Humble Road and north of Bender Road, outlined in red on this map. The project area is located at Flood Control District channels P130-05-00 and P130-05-01. Channel P130-05-01 is located in the middle of the red outlined project area and is a small channel that outfalls to the much larger Reinhardt Bayou, which is also referred to as P130-05-00. This channel, P130-05-01, is a source of flooding for the surrounding area. Now, before we discuss our study in the project area, please allow me to give you a quick overview of the life cycle of a project. This diagram represents the typical life cycle of a project. As you can see on this diagram, the initial stage is the feasibility study stage, and that is the current stage of the project we are discussing tonight. Each step in the project life cycle concludes with a final product. The final product of the feasibility stage is a report that summarizes the study and identifies recommendations. During the feasibility stage, the flood control district engineers and consultants conduct an in-depth evaluation, identify and quantify problems, develop and explore possible flood reduction alternatives, and ultimately make recommendations. Also during this stage, we want to gather input from the public, all of you, concerning flooding in the project area. If funding is available, the project moves from the feasibility stage into the project development, or also known as the preliminary engineering stage. During the preliminary engineering stage, flood control district engineers and environmental specialists develop and evaluate possible alternatives, prepare a preliminary engineering report, commonly called the PER, that includes project recommendations that meet flood damage reduction goals, and the engineers produce preliminary cost estimates for the alternatives. This report will identify needed right-of-way and determine utility relocation requirements, which is shown here as a separate stage. If funding is available, the project progresses to the design stage and then to the construction stage. Once the project is constructed and the warranty period ends, the infrastructure is transferred to Flood Control District's Infrastructure Division for operation and maintenance. Now, getting back to our study, we have 3 objectives for this feasibility study. The first objective is to investigate the source of flooding in the project area near channels P130-05-00 and P130-05-01. The second objective is to identify and evaluate 3 alternative solutions that would reduce flood risk in the project area. And the third is to identify which of the three alternatives is the optimum alternative to be further studied. Next, I will cover findings as a result of our investigation of the existing conditions. From our evaluation of the existing conditions and data related to the project area, we found that during a 100-year storm event, flooding occurs in the areas shown in purple on the image on the left during the 100-year storm event. Now, when we refer to the 100-year storm event, that is the amount of rain having a 1% chance of being equaled or exceeded in any given year. For Harris County, this amount of rainfall is just under 17 inches, and more precisely, it is 16.9 inches in a 24-hour period. The image on the right illustrates what we want to accomplish as a result of a project in this area. In order to accomplish our goal, the alternative solutions we expect to move forward as a possible flood risk reduction project must accomplish the following. First, reduce the water surface elevation at the 100-year storm event. When we look at the existing conditions on the left, you see the areas that are susceptible to flooding during a 100-year storm event. Our project goal is to reduce the water surface elevation by just over 2 feet, establishing less flood risk for the area, as demonstrated on the right side of this diagram. Second, we want to reduce flood risk within the entire project area. And finally, we must ensure there is no adverse impact on other areas. As a no adverse impact agency, the Flood Control District's project engineers ensure that improvements made on one part of the channel will not increase flooding on another part of the channel. In other words, work performed in another watershed or other parts of Greens Bayou cannot increase the amount of water in our project area. Through our initial evaluation, we have identified several potential challenges to accomplishing our ultimate project goal. First, there are a couple of locations where the culvert crossings along the P130-05-01 channel are undersized. These undersized culverts act as choke points for the drainage flow and cause the rainwater to accumulate. Second, areas along the P130-05-01 channel have excessive amounts of foliage overgrowth. This overgrowth constricts the flow of stormwater along the channel. Additionally, there are sections of the channel that are narrow, which also contribute to the constriction of flow. And lastly, there is one gas pipeline that crosses the channel. Therefore, the proposed alternatives for this project must not adversely affect this pipeline. Now, thinking back to the project life cycle we discussed earlier in the presentation, what are our next steps? Our next steps are receive input from area residents and stakeholders, which is the reason we are here with you tonight, or you're here with us. And then we will finalize the feasibility study, which will recommend a flood risk reduction solution. At this time, we do not know the exact timing for the next stage, but once the recommendation is finalized and the timing for next steps is defined, we will follow up with the community as updates are available. I will now turn the program back over to Sparkle to kick off the Q&A session. Sparkle.
Thank you. Thanks, Tawana. Before we move into the question and answer session, I want to share a quick reminder that we'd love to hear from you on this and other projects moving forward across Harris County. To learn more about this project, ask questions, or to sign up for our mailing list, please visit hcfcd.org/CI-022. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on the site in the box near the presentation live stream, and I've noticed many of you have already done that. You can also submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/CI-022, or you can submit a comment via phone using the meeting code 7799. If you're joining us via phone tonight, please press *6 to leave a message. Additionally, I want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District following the public comment period. Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and YouTube channel. Joining Tawana tonight for question and answer is Andrew, who is overseeing efforts on this project. And now it's time to take your questions. Our first question is for you, Andrew, and it's from John. Why does this area flood?
Well, good evening, everybody. During the feasibility study process, several causes were identified, including multiple undersized culvert crossings, channel foliage growth, and narrow section of the channel. Those are the main reason that this area floods.
All right, thank you so much for that. Tawana, the next question is for you. How is this project identified?
Thank you, Sparkle. Ahead of the August 25th bond election, when the $2.5 billion bond program was on the ballot for Harris County voters, the Flood Control District held a series of public outreach meetings in order to gather input on identified projects, as well as receive input on areas that flood but were not yet identified by the Flood Control District. And during those meetings and through subsequent follow-ups, the community identified the P130-05-01 area as an area that the Flood Control District should consider constructing a flood risk reduction project within. And as a result, this project was one of 38 projects based on community input that we received related to the 2018 bond program.
All right, thank you. Andrew, would you take this next question from Margaret? She asked, will the engineering plans include ways that will also help drain the neighborhood?
Well, at this time, it is too early to know because this is only a feasibility portion of the project. Once the plans for the project are clear, we will be reaching back out to provide the more updates.
All right, thank you. Tawana, our next question is from Tanja. And Tanja's question is the diagram on the flyer that we received shows streets drawn inside the red outline. Are the streets going to be constructed? What does the county plan to do with this property?
Thank you, Tanya. These streets that are shown on the diagram are not going to be constructed in our project. Our project will not construct streets. So this map was copied from a source that had those streets shown, but we're not constructing any streets.
All right, thank you for that. Our next question is from Kathleen, or actually it's a comment that the pipes on P130-05-01 need to be replaced on Bender Road and also Sharpio Lane. They are very old and collapsing, and water is being restricted and does not drain properly. Andrew, you have any comment on that?
Well, I'm gonna let Brianna, if she has more info on this old pipe.
Okay, we'll come back to that question.
Okay.
Tawana, let's take the next question, and it's from Sally, and she asks, what are the benefits of the project?
Okay. The benefits of the project are that we anticipate reducing flood risk in the area, and one of our goals is to reduce the water surface elevation by 2 feet in the project area where the channel is located and reduce flooding risk in the entire area. However, we cannot guarantee that the area will not flood again. So we do encourage everyone to purchase or maintain flood insurance, but the benefits is that we will our goal is to reduce the flood risk and the water surface elevation by at least 2 feet.
All right, thank you. Our next question is from Mauricio. And that question is Precinct 1 or City of Houston responsible for digging, opening, or maintaining roadside ditches along homes? They really need to be redug.
Well, some of that we have identified in our feasibility so far, even though this project is not final yet. We will determine if City of Houston or flood control, whose jurisdiction to go ahead and dig up and clean up those channels. Yes, those channels been identified and they are part of the problems for flooding in the area.
All right, thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to pause and just remind everyone again that there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on the site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can also submit a comment on our website at hcfcd.org/CI-022, or you can submit a comment via phone using the meeting code 7799. And if you're joining us via phone tonight, please press *6 to leave a message. And I'd like to just once again reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District following the public comment period. Information from this meeting, this recording, will also be made available on the Flood Control District's website and our YouTube channel. All right, with that, we're going to dive right back into the questions. And our next question is for Tawana. Mary wants to know, when will the recommended alternative be chosen?
Hi, Mary. It is really too early for us to be able to tell when the recommended alternative will be chosen. But once our project plans are clear, we will be reaching back out to the community. And as far as the feasibility study is concerned, it is scheduled to be completed during the spring of 2021.
All right, thank you so much for that. Now we're going back to a question that Kathleen had earlier, or a comment that was made about P130-05 and the need to replace pipes on Bender because they are very old and the water is being restricted and doesn't drain properly. As I understand it, the pipes were identified as one of the challenges for this project because they're undersized and constricting flow. And so we just wanted to share that information with you. Now we're going to move on to question 9 from Andrew. And that question is, or it's for Andrew, and the question is from Hugo. And that question is, what are the environmental impacts of the project? Also, it was mentioned that the acquisition is required. Are any displacements expected?
As far as the environmental, I don't think that we have any adverse impact for environmental because there's no, what's it called, wetlands identified in the project area. And as far as the replacement of, I'm not sure what is the question about replacement. I mean, displacement.
Are we expecting to have to move any people, or is that unknown at this stage? I think it's what they mean.
Not at the moment. It is a little bit too early to identify for any of that, but no, not at the moment.
Okay. And again, I just want to reiterate that there are no environmental impacts identified at this time. All right, let's take this next question for Tawana. Will any roads be closed during construction? What about loud noises from construction during all hours of the day? Will that be an issue?
It is really too early to determine about road closures because we are in the feasibility stage. If funding allows us to move into the PER stage, we'll know more about the project, but right now it's a little bit too early. Usually specific road closures or anything like that is determined during the preliminary engineering stage, with more information during the design stage.
All right, thank you for that. All right, we have another comment, and it's, in addition to lowering the water surface elevation, are retention ponds going to be constructed on the property? Andrew, can you take that?
Yes, I'll take that. Still, again, it's too early to go over any detention basin in this area because we are at the feasibility studying stage. We're not in a PER or design. However, for any needs for a future detention basin in the area, we have already purchased some land in that area by channel P130-05-01.
All right, thank you. Tawana, we have a question that has come in about the funding for this project. How much will it cost?
That too is an excellent question, and it's a little bit early to explain anything about the cost. One of our stages, which is the preliminary engineering stage, requires that our consultants provide cost estimates for the alternatives. So we're not there yet. Just be patient with us.
All right, Tawana, can you also speak to sort of how this project fits into the larger bond program?
Sorry for the delay. I was having problems unmuting. Yes, this project was identified as during the series of meetings that we had prior to the bond election. We presented projects that we wanted to consider to the community during meetings in each watershed, but in turn, the people who attended those meetings gave us input on areas that flood. So this project was one of 38 projects that were identified by input that we received from the community concerning flooding in the area. So it is a bond project, and it was one of 38 projects that were identified by the community as needing flood risk reduction.
All right, thank you. We also have a comment. If you are improving flooding in this area, are you just flooding another area as a result? Andrew, can you take that question, please?
Sure, that's an excellent question. The short answer is no, because the flood control district is a no adverse impact agency. Project engineers must ensure that improvements made on one part of the channel in this area will not increase flooding on the another part of the channel.
All right, thank you so much for that. And I'll take this next question. Is there a place to find a copy of the presentation or a recording of this meeting? Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and YouTube channel. So if you're looking for it, it will be available there for you. And we also want to remind you that if you have a question you want to ask following the event, you can visit the website at hcfcd.org/CI-022. Again, that website, it's on your screen, is hcfcd.org/CI-022. All right, I'll dive back into the questions. And our next question is for you, Tawana, and it is, will there be any amenities planned around this project?
Good question. The Flood Control District welcomes partnerships with other entities to construct recreational amenities. We support multi-use of our facilities for such areas, but we do not fund them. So if there's a financial partner that wants to build recreational amenities, we will be happy to discuss that with them. Also, one other point, those amenities must not interfere with the primary objective of our project or the primary use of the project for flood risk reduction.
All right, thank you so much. I just saw a question come in from Hugo, and it is, if there are residents that do not have access to the internet, how are they being communicated about these meetings and how can they participate to provide input? So that's a twofold question. And the first part to that is we actually mail out meeting invites and information about this meeting in addition to what we post and email out to our residents to provide them the most notice. The other second part to that question, as I will respond, is that there is a phone number. So while many of you are viewing this meeting online, there's actually an option for individuals to call in and leave a message with their comments about the project. And that phone number is listed on your screen. It is 855-925-2801. And it is and the meeting code is 7799. That number is available through the public comment period where individuals can continue up until February 18th. They're able to call us and provide feedback on this project. It is one of our commitments here at the Flood Control District to ensure everybody has an opportunity to provide input and feedback. It's what we do, community engagement. All right, with that, I will go on to our next question. How can I learn more about other projects happening in Greens Bayou? Tawana, you want to take that?
Sure. Anyone can learn more about other projects happening in Greens Bayou by logging into www.hcfcd.org, then /greens, and select the project that you're interested in. Also, additionally, each page has a submit a comment. So if you want to submit a comment or a question about that project, you can do so at the www.hcfcd.org/greens website for the particular project you're interested in.
All right, okay, I have one more question. But before I get to that question, Tawana, I've noticed that a number of people have joined late. So I think at this point, I'd like to pause and go back over some of the specific project information just to make sure that everyone who's joined late has the opportunity to hear the information on this project.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to go back and start on the flood risk reduction near P130-05-00 and P130-05-01 slide. Okay, can you move up to one slide, please? Okay, so this particular project, as I mentioned earlier, is in the Greens Bayou watershed. And Greens Bayou is located in North Harris County and encompasses portions of the cities of Humboldt and also the city of Houston, and as well as unincorporated Harris County. And the upper reach of Greens Bayou flows in an eastward direction, and the lower reach flows southward into the Houston Ship Channel. Now, the Greens Bayou watershed covers about 212 square miles and includes 4 primary streams: Greens Bayou, Halls Bayou, Garner's Bayou, and Reinhardt Bayou. Now, this map demonstrates the many flood risk reduction projects occurring across Greens Bayou. In addition to the flood risk reduction projects shown here in yellow and in green, the stars on the map, Harris County Engineering, who has jurisdiction over subdivision drainage projects in unincorporated Harris County, is also working on numerous projects across the watershed, and those projects are shown here in red. All of these projects are funded in part or in whole through the 2018 bond program. And for more information, as I mentioned earlier, you can go to hcfcd.org/greens. Now, tonight, the project we're focusing on is in the Greens Bayou watershed and located in the area that is outlined in red. And the project is located west of Old Humble Road and north of Bender Road. The main project area is located on Flood Control District's channels P130-05-00 and P130-05-01. Now, P130-05-01 is the channel right in the middle of this diagram and of the red area. And it is a small channel that outfalls to the much larger Reinhardt Bayou, which is also referred to as P130-05-00. Now, this P130-05-01 channel is a source of flooding for the surrounding area. Let's move along to slide where we talk about the project. Okay. Slide 16, thank you. So we have three objectives for the feasibility study that we're doing. And the first objective is to investigate the source of flooding in the project area near channels P130-05-00 and P130-05-01. The second objective is to identify and evaluate three alternative solutions that would reduce flood risk in the project area. And the third is to identify which of the three alternatives is the optimum alternative to be further studied. Next, I will cover findings as a result of our existing conditions. Now, we have evaluated the existing conditions, and from our evaluation of the existing conditions and data related to the project area, we found that during the 100-year storm event, flooding occurs in the areas shown in purple on the image on the left side of this diagram, and that is during the 100-year storm event. When we refer to the 100-year storm event, that is the amount of rain having a 1% chance of being equaled or exceeded in any given year. And for Harris County, this amount of rainfall is just under 17 inches within a 24-hour period. The image on the right illustrates what we want to accomplish as the result of a project in the area. In order to accomplish our goal, the alternative solutions we expect to move forward as a possible flood risk reduction project must accomplish the following. First, reduce the water surface elevation at the 100-year storm event. And when we look at the existing conditions on the left, you see the areas that are susceptible to flooding during the 100-year storm event. Our project goal is to reduce the water surface elevation by just over 2 feet, establishing less flood risk for the area as demonstrated on the right side of the diagram. Second, we want to reduce flood risk within the entire area. And then finally, we want to reduce flood risk. Finally, we want to ensure that there is no adverse impact on other areas. And we mentioned earlier, but I would love to just reiterate that the Flood Control District is a no adverse impact agency, which means that any projects that we have either in anywhere else in the watershed or within Greens Bayou cannot cause flooding downstream or cannot increase the amount of water in your project area. Through our initial evaluation, we have identified several potential challenges to accomplishing our ultimate goal for this project. First, there are a couple of locations where the culvert crossings along P130-05-01 channel are undersized, and these undersized culverts act as choke points for the drainage flow and cause the rainwater to accumulate. Second, areas along P130-05-01 channel have excessive amounts of foliage overgrowth, and this overgrowth constricts the flow of stormwater along the channel. Additionally, there are sections of the channel that are narrow, which also constrict the flow. And last but not least, there is one gas pipeline that crosses the channel, and this project or the proposed alternatives cannot adversely affect this pipeline. So what are our next steps? Our next steps, as I mentioned earlier, are to receive input from you, and that's why you're here tonight. And then we will be getting back to you later with updates on our feasibility study.
All right, thank you so much. It's always good when we have individuals who join our meetings late to be able to go back over the information and make sure that everyone understands and receives the information. We did have a question that came in regards to why we are hosting a virtual meeting instead of an in-person meeting. I stated this at the start of the meeting, but I just want to share once again that this meeting is being offered to continue to share vital information during this period when in-person public meetings have been suspended due to safety concerns from the COVID-19 pandemic. So we want everyone to stay safe. And that is why we are not having in-person meetings at this time. All right, now Tawana, there is a question from Kathleen, and she wants to know, are wetland areas identified? There were many areas in that area, many wetland areas in that area that always stayed wet and never dried out, but when the developer moved in and bulldozed everything, it destroyed the area. Can you speak to that?
I would like to pass that one on to our consultant who's on the line.
Okay, we'll come back to that one in just a second. Let's take the next question. All right, our next question is the feasibility study. Will the feasibility study evaluate green infrastructure strategies that can always assist with water quality that enters the bayou? Andrew, would you take that one?
Yes, we always do that. We always have water quality, assurances that whenever we do any projects, we make sure that that is taken care of.
All right, okay, now let's go to the next question. And it is, how does the flood control district ensure organizations interested in providing amenities at their project sites, ensure that they're doing them equitably? Do you all monitor which sites have partnerships or express interest by these organizations?
Would you repeat that question again, please? I want to make sure I understand the intent.
Yeah, sure thing. Natalie asked, how does the flood control district ensure organizations interested in providing amenities at their project sites that they're doing them equitably? Do we monitor which sites have partnerships or expressed interest by these organizations?
Okay. Oh, I think I understand the intent here. Okay, so if there's an organization that is interested in having the partnership with us, we do meet with them. Usually they'll reach out to us and let us know they're interested, and we meet with them and let them know what our criteria and what our targets are for the project. And we have to ensure that they do not interfere with what our objectives or our targets are for the project. So there are some restrictions sometimes, so they can't just decide how much they want and where they want to put things. We have to make sure that whatever amenities they want do not interfere with the objective of the project. So we stay engaged with them during the preliminary engineering or feasibility or design stage, so that they are aware of what our requirements are for the project, and that those requirements fit into whatever they want, fits into or does not compromise our criteria for flood risk reduction projects.
All right, thank you. And I know I said we'd go back to a question. There was a really specific question about an area that dries out and stays or never dries out. I do want to mention that in these meetings, one of the difficulties we face is there are times when we need more specifics. So I just want to reiterate that if we don't address your question tonight because we need more specific information, that this platform doesn't allow for, we do follow up with everyone who submits a question following the public comment period. So we will reach out to you directly if we need more information to effectively answer your question. All right, so that is that. Let me go back and remind everyone once again of how you can submit a comment. We have about 10 more minutes left where you can submit a comment or a question. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/CI-022, or you can submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801 using the meeting code 7799. And if you are joining us via phone tonight, please press *6 to leave a message. Now, Tawana, I'm seeing a question about the timeline of this project. Can you expound a little more on what the next steps are?
Sure. The next steps are, first of all, to receive input from the community about any concerns they have within the project area. And then that information will be taken by our engineers, and they will utilize that in evaluating the area, and then they will finalize their feasibility study. And we anticipate that that study will be finalized during spring of 2021. After that, someone will be reaching back out to the community to let them know more specifically what the next steps are, because if the project moves into the preliminary engineering stage, we'll have to make sure that funding is available for that stage. So we will be giving you updates once the feasibility study is complete.
All right. I see a question here about what exactly the channel improvements entail. Tawana, would you take that one as well, please?
Well, earlier I spoke about some of the challenges of the project. And one of the challenges of the project is that there are some areas of the channel where there is excess foliage. You know, the foliage, the greenery and all that, the plants, they do constrict flow. And then there are other areas of the channel that are narrow. So those particular challenges will be looked at during the feasibility stage, and our consultant will come back with some recommendations on how to reduce flood risk with respect to those challenges that need to be overcome.
All right, thank you. One of the things that I'd like to get some information on, we've mentioned kind of where this project is in the project life cycle. A lot of people don't understand the project life cycle. Can you share broadly kind of how the project life cycle works? And Tawana, you'll have to unmute. There you go.
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. Okay, so you see the slide here that shows the boxes, and right now we're in the feasibility stage. So when we start that particular stage, we're gathering information about existing conditions. We're wanting to hear from you, the public, about flooding in the area, and then we're going to study the area, and our consultant is going to come up with some recommendations on or some alternatives for reducing flood risk. Now, each one of these stages that's shown here on this diagram ends with a particular product. So at the end of the feasibility stage, we will get a report, and that report will summarize what the 3 alternatives are that were studied, and it will give us a recommendation for the alternative that should be further studied. And after that, if funding is available, then the project will move into the preliminary engineering stage, which is the second box. And during that stage, the engineers and environmental specialists further develop and evaluate the possible alternatives. So there's a limited amount of engineering that's done during the feasibility stage, and then that engineering is expanded in the preliminary engineering stage. And during preliminary engineering, which we also call sometimes the PER period, there are additional environmental factors that are considered. If there's any additional right-of-way that's needed, that's taken into consideration. And also during that stage, the consulting engineers provide cost estimates for the alternatives that were studied. And the preliminary engineering stage ends also with a final engineering report. In addition to the studies about the environmental aspects of the project, the geotechnical, there's also an area of study that involves the need for any possible right-of-way or utility relocation. And that can take a lot of time. So that in itself is shown as a stage here on the diagram. If funding is available after preliminary engineering, then the project moves into the design stage. And during the design stage is when the design consultant actually designs what the recommended alternative is to reduce flood risk reduction in the area. And if funding is available, or when funding is available to construct the project is constructed. And after the construction period, there's a warranty period. And when the warranty expires for the work that was constructed, the project infrastructure is transferred to our infrastructure division, and they operate and maintain the facility.
All right, thank you so much for that. We've had a few additional questions come in. Natalie says an individual asked about the recent development in their area. Do we join projects with existing projects in the area? Tawana, will you take that one, please?
What's the last part of that question? Do we join projects with existing projects?
Yeah, is there ever a time when we might combine projects that are located in the same, near each other?
Well, the flood control district has a capital improvement department, and we also have a maintenance engineering department, and we coordinate amongst our departments to determine what is the best way to procure a project or to implement a project. We also coordinate with Harris County Engineering on our projects. So there's a lot of coordination going on to make sure that we're making the best use of our resources in order to implement a project.
All right, it's always helpful to know how all of these things work together. All right, and this next question is for Andrew, and it's from Hugo. He wants to know, will the team working on the recommendations from the feasibility study evaluate opportunities for open space improvements for the community and potential partnerships, or will they only focus on the flood mitigation requirement?
They are only focusing on the flood mitigation for this feasibility study.
All right. There is another question about the pipeline crossing challenge. How do we resolve the pipeline crossing challenge? Tawana, would you take that one?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Whenever there's a pipeline, we have what we call utility engineering group that looks at the depth of the pipeline, determines who the owner is, and we communicate and coordinate with that pipeline owner concerning what our project is hoping to do and whether or not their pipeline is even active and what needs to happen in order to build our project, but yet maintain the integrity of their pipeline. Or if the pipeline needs to be relocated, we coordinate with them concerning what's required to relocate it so we can build our project. As I mentioned earlier, we are no adverse impact. So our project will not adversely impact a pipeline, and we do try to start that communication and coordination with them early so we can find out what needs to happen with respect to that project with that pipeline in order to build our project.
Okay, and we'll take one last question before we close. And Tawana, I'd like for you to take this one as well. Who all does the flood control district partner with? You mentioned Harris County Engineering, but are there others?
Sure, we're open to partnerships with anybody who wants to talk with us about it. If they have funding for something that they want to build along our channels or adjacent to our basins, we'll be happy to discuss that with them. So it could be a utility district. It just depends on what the resources are. But we are open to discussing multi-use of our facilities for recreational amenities as long as we don't fund them. We cannot fund them. So if there's anybody out there who's interested, we'd love to hear from you.
All right, thank you. And with that, I'd like to share one final reminder that we are continuing to accept comments and feedback on this project through February 18th. We also encourage everyone to get flood insurance as flood season in Harris County runs year round. Thank you again for joining us this evening and for your engagement with this project. We look forward to continuing to share updates as our work moves forward. Stay safe and have a good evening.